To breathe, to cleanse, to erase, to immerse, to submerge, to rebuild. I don't really know where I'm from. My family can only trace our bloodlines back to Maryland and Virginia, and I haven't done the Ancestry.com thing because I'm sure I'll get the general West Africa when referring to where my blackness originated from. There's 16 countries in West Africa. To breathe, to prepare, to fix, to marinate, to remember. Because of this disconnect, the history I clinch on to starts with my ancestors whose identities and cultural roots were erased when slavery reached North America. The history that I connect with is the trauma and brutality of slavery, Civil War, Jim Crow laws, you know the rest. I connect with the constant fight to exist in peace and to be given the opportunity to excel. To breathe, to add, to pour, to create. My history is complicated by the intersectionality of my race and gender. Domesticity and hidden labor haunt over me and my sisters. We all are tired, we're all frustrated, and we all give way too much. It's our job to clean up the mess. That's how it's always been. To bathe, to prepare, to pour, to heat, to move. I am tied to the black woman who would take care of children that don't share her own blood. And the black woman who raised children that are not her own in a house that she did not even get to use the restroom in or sit at the dining room table. To breathe, to emerge, to dry, to remember, to peel, to scrape, to tell. I don't really know where I'm from, but I know that trauma is passed down through DNA. I know that when I was in the attic, that I was surrounded by the women before me. They turned trauma into strength, suppression into power. They found love and peace where it didn't exist. That's my history.
I feel a connection through Oshun because of my mother's presence. When I'm with her and we're meditating and chanting and, really getting that energy, that's when I feel that fierceness and the strongest. So I was introduced to it by my mother. I went to a meditation with doing African drums. That energy was very much different. I really don't know how to describe it. But the connection that I felt with them, it's like after I felt meditation with all of these black women where we were sitting around chanting and practicing a real fullness. I really don't know how to describe it. I felt all floaty afterwards. Like it was something very new for me that had me intrigued. I'm like, we sat here, we talked to each other, we uplifted each other, we listened, she read, she told us, she gave us some knowledge. I'm going, see what this is about. Check it out. It becomes more clear to me why we should return to things that feel so close and natural to us. So that's kind of what I practice on, things that feel close and natural to me. And when I feel the energy, that's when I acknowledge that it's present. I think talking to my ancestors and giving them honor and thanks and remembering them kind of helps me move better through generational traumas and stuff like that too. I become more clear to things that perhaps people before me weren't, like perhaps my mom or her mother, or you know, because I'm choosing to be more conscious about the way that I do things and the way that it makes me feel and others. Um, I think that is purposeful for me in that way, sharing those connections.
The divine is within us. It's our greatest legacy. It's how we have survived throughout the last troubling 400 years. It's held us up. It lifts us. This haven is where we go. Yes, it lifts our spirit. It gives us a daily strength. It takes the fear away. Our ancestors passed that courage on to us. We pass it on. Our challenges have not lessened. As a race, we are still at the bottom of this caste system. We feel it as our kin pass on many times by acts of violence and reckless, inhumane treatment, the lowest wages, the hardest work, poverty, lack of formal education, and the most chances of being killed, incarcerated, or drug-ridden. Our ancestors have been our greatest gift, a legacy of spirit, goodness, and strength. They believed in divinity. We hear this power in our churches, in our songs, in our pain. Debt may knock on our door. Someone may hold a gun to our heads. People might spat on us and deny us our equal rights. Yet somehow the Spirit raises us up, and we will always begin again.
On method. As a non-theologian, my conception of Black divinity resides in the intangible, transcendent power of the Black artistic tradition. I am impacted beyond my five senses by the inescapable tactile intimacy of James Baldwin and the heavier than heaven on the mind yet nutritious for the soul gifts of Toni Morrison, whose masterpiece Beloved aestheticized a love so selfless and untethered to the temporal and spatial reality that in order to understand its beauty, you have to first suffer through unspeakable pain. The life-affirming power of Miles Davis and John Coltrane is such that I had no idea I was even alive until I heard Kind of Blue and The Love Supreme. The towering genius of Lupe Fiasco opened my eyes to rap as the language of the oppressed, completely unburdened by the damning intellectual and creative ceiling of the commodified status quo. I still remember where I was when the food and liquor cooled and the youth were hit by the wave and had to be saved by the long chains. The radical and rebellious deployment of Beautiful Abstraction by Basquiat was too aesthetically refined and bold to be ignored by those who have far too long labored under the illusion of the dominant centrality and therefore presupposed validity of their limited gaze. From Dustheads to The Warrior, Basquiat left behind masterpieces that we should all feel blessed by the existence of. This tradition is too vast and rich for my limited lexicon, but it is where I find Black divinity. For this series, I wanted to focus on Black rage, more specifically Black rage as an inexpressible thing. In this work, I envisioned a version of expression that is only possible with reciprocity, and given the works I pulled from, that qualifier renders Black rage inexpressible on a societal level. I pulled directly from the works of Frank B. Wilderson III, Zakiya Jackson, Sadiqa Hartman, Orlando Patterson, Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, Akil Membe, Billie Holiday, Lauryn Hill, Davon Bennett, Carlton Weekly, James H. Cone, and Frantz Fanon. I sought to explore the faulty conception of the human being and how it was built on an anti-Black foundation, enabled by the paradigmatic condition of social death, and how that directly rendered the reciprocity of our rage impossible. The great paradox of this endeavor is the very real possibility that nothing I've created will get the reciprocity it needs to be considered a valid expression, thus taking on the exact character of what I am attempting to aestheticize in the first place. Yet and still, I'm humbled by the opportunity to try. So come with me and explore Black rage.
It is a big wonder to think about what spirituality looked like before Black bodies arrived to the Americas. and like looking at history and reading like notes and stuff from explorers of how Africans would treat rocks or sticks. Like I never understood my fascination with rocks and sticks until I sort of read that and why I think these things are special and why I have these things around the house. And then even as a kid, I remember my dad giving me a rock and me loving that rock, or me seeing like driftwood that my mom had collected and wondering like why did she have this driftwood. But it wasn't until years later till I realized that maybe this is some sort of cultural retention that black people have, something that's in our DNA to pick up these rocks or pick up these sticks or to relate to these things with nature and want to remember those moments and remember those things. I'm not trying to rely so much on my Western education. I'm trying to invent from a place of pure expression, from a place of my own origins, which is another reason why I use the found objects, and I think about that in a lineage of makers who've done that, like the Lonnie Hollies, like the Thornton Dials, or the Radcliffe Baileys, or people who have continued to use like common and discarded objects. I think about that in a way, in a lineage or of makers of black tradition. But for me, it's just to apply these abstractions and or think about these marks and do it in a post-colonial way, but also trying to pay attention to the movement that is spiritual, which is just the mark, or which is just being led by this higher form or this higher self, which is what jazz is, which is what freestyling is, which is what black culture is, which is we know how to do what we know how to do. And in doing that, it becomes profound, it becomes more than, or if we think about it, it becomes American culture, even the language, even the dance, even the music. Like American culture is influenced by black youth culture. And so in some ways that, in a lot of ways, that's the beauty. And I never, I don't know, feel less than. I never dwell on, or I mean, I'm okay, you know what I mean?